Hello, and welcome to the Dungeon Masters Guildhouse. This is a weekly podcast in which I, your host, Matthew Whitby, sit down with people all across the tabletop, RPG, and surrounding space, just because, just all-encompassing, everyone. And this week, I'm delighted to be joined by Kirsty Kidd. Hello.
Hello.
How are you doing this fine afternoon?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good, thank you. And how are you?
Yeah, I must admit, it's a case of where, okay, to give full disclosure, we're recording this at about 5 p.m. UK time. It's too dark. Like the weather, the moment we enter like the changing the clocks back, I don't like looking at like 4 o'clock like nighttime.
Yeah, it's terrible. I mean, especially I don't know how it's been for you today, but like it has been clouded over all day. There has been no sun.
No, I must admit. So I guess it's the benefit. So I'm kind of like the north of the UK, so towards like York.
Right,
And
okay.
I must admit, I haven't left my house today, so I haven't really been the benefits of working from home slash pandemic. But no, now that we've kind of routinely got out our our obligation as British citizens to complain about the weather, we've done that. Now we can talk about some cool stuff, some RPG stuff. So generally for the people kind of listening then, what's some of the things that you've been making?
Well, okay, so I had a look through my catalog to prepare, and I was like, okay, what's the one thing that I do? And there isn't really a one thing that I do. I've done probably a little bit of everything except adventure writing so far. So yeah, I've done a bunch of monsters. I've done some magic item things and spells and some like encountery type things. Yeah.
No, I must. Yeah, and I think again that was kind of because was it looking at like how long was it? You've got like it's dragons, delve-ins, and dives. I think that was the kind of like restaurants essentially.
No, there's not actually any restaurants.
Well,
which is a real shame.
Misled by the title.
Yeah, I really wish I'd done a dragon restaurant now, but I did a carnival. It was like unique takes on some dragon lairs.
Oh, nice.
And there's some really fun stuff in there.
Fair. Yeah, no, I can definitely see delve-ins. There you go. There's not actually in the title. There's no reference of restaurants in any way. It's just automatically connecting it. But then and there's in kind of like the magic shop catalog as well as kind of like the kind of bows and ammo kind of kind of like compendiums or like assortment products kind of thing.
Yeah, I guess anything where I can throw every idea in my head against the wall is kind of where I go.
So.
Yeah.
No, I was gonna say so before we kind of like I guess dig a little bit deeper into like some of like the designs you kind of came up with then and again getting all those ideas together to throw at a wall. what was kind of the inspiration to kind of getting you like starting writing and kind of actually involved in like the tabletop RPG industry?
Well, I mean, one of my like sort of side gigs is I make tokens and minis for tabletop games, and when I was like setting up the socials for that, I followed a bunch of D&D people and other tabletop people, and I saw a couple of like open calls, and I'd been homebrewing for a little while. I was like, sure, why not? And then it ended up kind of like becoming the side gig to my side gig, and then and then it kind of took over a bit more, but yeah. It was just
I feel I kind of buried it because what is it? It's Battle Fluff is like the name of like the kind of so was it more the case of like again I'm always like jealous of the kind of like the like creative like all DMs are creative, but I meant like they're like physically creative, like they're actually like making like little models, they're actually making like set pieces. Just because I feel lazy by comparison. But I guess what was it more the case of like you've just always been quite kind of crafty and kind of like making things?
Yeah, I just I am the sort of person who needs to keep my hands busy. Like I literally have a fidget toy with me right now, so I can't just sit and watch TV. So yeah, I've always done like a lot of needlecraft and crochet and that kind of thing, and then I got into needle felting, which is how I make my minis a couple of years ago. So it didn't actually start as something I did for my D&D group, but things clash.
Yeah.
Combine. Like,
I think, yeah, no, I'm very much with you where like my life is very much like the whims of fate, where
yeah.
I'm kind of blown around from thing to thing. Where that's things gotta happen. And
Yeah.
needle felting, if I is that the one where it kind of you stab things and then it gets fluffier?
Yes. It's a lot of stabbing. It's, yeah, you start with like literally raw wool, and you have a special needle that has these kind of like little divots in it. And as you poke, it all becomes like one big tangle, and somehow that makes something that looks quite nice. And surprisingly sturdy. If you've never held anything felt, you'd think it'd be really soft, but you can get it like pretty dense.
Okay, fair.
So yeah.
So then, with out of all the kind of like the models and stuff that you've kind of made, what's like been one of like your proudest, like models? I don't know. Like I guess like.
I that is kind of tough. I'm a little bit biased because it's quite a recent one. But I made an owlbear, and I was really pleased with how that came out, and getting it to like stand up on its back two legs and not fall over. I was pretty proud of that. So
yeah, I imagine it's kind of careful balancing, like where I imagine like I don't know why, but mine goes straight to like almost like paper clips. They kind of like, do they have that the kind of like a wire structure to them or?
Usually I don't, but I'm working on a beholder at the moment, and I'm using a wire armature for the first time, so you can, but not necessarily. They don't freestand as well.
I'm more surprising myself. I knew more about this than I thought I did.
You're doing well.
So basically it was literally the case of just kind of involving yourself in the community, the larger kind of community, just kind of saw these kind of open calls.
Yeah.
Do you remember which was the first kind of open call that you responded to?
Yeah, the first one I saw was a call for items for like a Fae themed book. The book actually came out a few months ago, but it was the first one I actually worked on.
Okay, so no, it wasn't. So yeah, through it was through the veil as well. Which I think I'm also on that project.
Oh,
I think
there's a lot of people on that one.
I must admit, it is the case of like, and I must admit, that's for me as well. I think that's definitely been one of the projects that's had like the longest timeline. Yeah. But I think it's simply because like that project had like so many kind of like unique artists involved, so many kind of like, again, everyone kind of submitted like 5 items, I think, or like something in that kind of spectrum. Yeah. What out of the items you made, what was your personal favorite?
Most of mine, I didn't really write standalone items. I was helping fill out the tables at the end, so I did like the inventory gear and trinkets and stuff like that. Trying to think.
I must admit, that is kind of like an issue because like it almost like, again, there's magic items are quite easy to kind of design just because you kind of have the kind of, I guess, like quite defined design space to kind of work with. When it comes to things like adventuring gear, it's a little bit more challenging because you almost have to go like they have to be weaker, but they also almost have to fit like a very particular niche.
I ended up going like super specific with it. I think one that I remember was like swamp stilts. So you can ignore difficult terrain in swamplands if you use these stilts. But so like it has a use, but it's not going to take the place of a spell or anything like that.
And although I must admit, I do like the idea of a character whose kind of like defining trait is just them kind of wandering around on these swamp stilts.
Yeah.
Like it's not swamp terrain, but they're just kind of attached to them. No, I think for me I did an item which was like a bag of starlight.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, it was again, I was super chuffed because it was like I had like an artist kind of go and kind of depict the items, and it was like this is for me at that time, because again it was a while ago, just having that process of like, wow, someone's actually gonna draw like my words in like a kind of weird way. I must admit though, I cannot remember what the item did. I would have to kind of speculate. I know it's like, again, it's a bag of starlight, it does something kind of cool. I can't remember what.
It sounds cool.
Sometimes that's all you need. It just needs to kind of like sound cool. And then kind of, do you remember kind of what the project trajectory from there was? So after kind of like Through the Veil.
After Through the Veil, I think I did. I submitted a monster to I think it was the Scientific Secrets book.
Nice.
Which is really, really fun, because like the sort of gimmick to the book is you have to find something like scientific or something from nature to inspire your creature. So that was a nice one as well.
And no, I must admit, so ages ago, I think it's run by is Zeke Gonzalez?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I remember hearing about, well, one, like just their approach to science, which was kind of like fascinating, but the kind of real life animals that are out there that they sound like monsters. Like,
yeah.
The ones that are like shooting blood out of their eyes, or like what was the kind of like I guess creature that you kind of like not creature, animal.
The animal that I based mine off of beluga whales. I did pitch as well. I wanted to do a creature based on barnacles, but I think that was quite a popular submission because this was for like an Icewind Dale tie-in sort of thing. And yeah, barnacles are weird. It's like
I don't know anything about barnacles. What's the cool about barnacles?
It's like in the Arctic where you have the sea and like a little bit of salt will get frozen at the top and it will just create this kind of like icicle that goes down to the seafloor and it just freezes everything. There's some amazing time-lapse footage of like starfish just getting like completely frozen in spot from like this finger coming from above. It's crazy.
Okay, but it's not like a creature itself. It's just literally like a build up of salt. But then I imagine like D&D, you make that like a mimic, or like like the ropers, or like the things that fall from the stalagmites or stalactites.
I can't remember what my pitch was, but I know someone had a creature in that book based on it because it's such a weird thing.
It's a weird thing. So, well, it's also because it sounds magic. The idea of like this entity coming down and just freezing things.
Yeah.
I'm always amazed by, I don't know what it is. There's those videos of like the bottles of water that people just tap, and then they just like freeze from like top to bottom. I don't know what it is, whether it's the fact that like they're on that edge. It's weird the YouTube rabbit holes you fall down occasionally. But beluga whales.
So I basically ended up with like this psionic creature that stalks the land like as a pack hunter, just because belugas have like that really mammoth sort of head that they actually use in real life to focus their I've lost the word.
Is it like their sonar or like
like their sonar sort of thing? They have this really fatty bit on their head that they can sort of direction their sonar with. So I had this idea for like psionic land whales.
I must admit, again, yeah. I don't know how to feel about that. The idea of like direct, like there's these things of like essentially have like an antenna on their head.
It's incredible.
Funny enough, like I've been writing some stuff for Icewind Dale recently, and obviously a good amount of like Icewind Dale that they're kind of like they have what's it called, the knucklehead, like knucklehead. I forget the type of carp. I'm gonna say it's carp. But they're all talking about like what apparently again this is one where it kind of reality blends with that kind of like fantasy side of things. That they talk about the kind of fish bones, for at least like knucklehead fish, are kind of equivalent to like ivory, and they can be used to make this thing called scrimshaw, which essentially is just like bone carvings for like on it. But it's that case where like I've done kind of some research into the kind of like like scrimshaw and kind of like where it sits within D&D. But I must admit, I think I'm paranoid now that I may go out in like everyday conversation and talk about there's fish bones can be used like there is as highly sought as ivory, when I don't actually know for sure. But I think that's kind of what's kind of awesome is the fact that like there is so much kind of inspiration for like any kind of like RPG just kind of out in the real world that you can just like with minor tweaks. It is literally the case of like this beluga whales have that kind of psionics, but it's just not as it's not as cool. Just being able to talk to people underwater isn't as cool as just being able to, I don't know, like fire psionic beams.
But Yeah, just watching like nature documentaries in general, like it can be so useful for picking up weird little things. Like recently, I've been writing a couple of like alien species for player races, and one of those was really inspired by a sea slug that's like is essentially transparent, and it eats moss and lives off the moss's photosynthesis. Like,
Right.
that's
So
amazing.
it like essentially the slug photosynthesizes in like with extra steps. It doesn't do it itself. It just
Yeah.
kind of outsources the.
Yeah, so that just, yeah, there's a lot of weird things if you look for them, I guess.
No, I must admit, I think, well, particularly when it comes to like the oceans, because I think it's like well documented that like when you go really deep, like the lowest level of the ocean, animals get that like this evolution
Yeah.
as a whole has made everything very weird.
Yeah,
I think I mentioned this before on a podcast, but like I always think of like blobfish.
blobfish, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what they do. They just no, again, no offense to like especially no offense to any blobfish listening. But no, they don't look good. They don't look like that should be the trajectory of evolution be
No,
going in. Things should be
no,
less.
they're pretty scary.
Yeah.
I've seen these deep sea fish as well that have like completely see-through heads, and they use them to look up above themselves.
No,
Yeah,
that's worse than like an owl. Like also, the owl being able to like rotate their head like
yeah,
360. Just the idea of the owl not turning their head at all, but just peering through.
yeah.
But I guess because like so now that you said that though, is like I do like the idea of like I don't know like a lich or like some sort of undead creature with like a crystal skull, and the
Yeah,
idea that they couldn't be surprised because they can look in all directions. But that's what I mean. Yeah, I
that's
think we're
very
just like
cool.
more proving the point that literally there's so much you can kind of take inspiration from in the real world.
Hmm.
I'm curious about so okay, so we've got sea slugs, we've got beluga whales. Is any kind of like third? Because I feel like I'm learning science now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why I've gone down the fish route. I don't know a lot about fish really. um, oh geez, I don't know now.
No, well, I was
I've
gonna say, in
lost all
fairness,
my
I think we'll
facts.
probably like it is that case of like it will as we kind of talk about some of the other stuff. It'll be like, oh yeah, no, for that I kind of like took inspiration from X or Y. Um,
Yeah, probably.
I did also want to say, so one of the things that you've kind of worked on as well is Vice and Virtue,
Yeah.
which is an absolutely beautiful book.
Oh,
Like
isn't it amazing?
it is like it is amazing. It was so it's basically like a fortune telling kind of supplement.
Yeah, it's kind of a way of making like kind of personal encounters for your group and stuff like that. And I was so pleased when I got to work on that. That was like a different way of looking at things, and I think it actually made my own encounter building better working on that. So
Interesting. So I guess do you mind kind of like again, assuming you can talk about it, I don't want to like what was some of the kind of like the stuff that you kind of the encounters that you kind of worked on weaving in or kind of because it's not encounters per se, it's more like a this deconstruction of how you can.
yeah, so you the idea was you I was writing like a spread. So for you'd have like a theme. I think one of my themes was desert that I wrote for. So encounters in a desert, and the whole thing of Vice and Virtue is based off of uh, the seven deadly sins and the seven. I forget what the adjectives
I
for
think no, I
virtues.
think they are like yeah the virtues. I don't know if they
Yeah.
like I'm gonna use a Google. We're gonna find out sins and no it is yes sins and virtues or saints.
Yeah.
We'll stick with
So,
virtues.
yeah, so then you would use each of the virtues to sort of theme an idea. So if you had, sorry, you
No, no.
use the vice and the virtue. So you would have like the twin themes of like sloth and hardworking,
Mm-hmm.
and you would create some sort of encounter that would allow the characters to express one of those virtues.
So it's essentially like each of these encounters can kind of go either way, and it kind of has the players kind of have that chance to, again, because even though if you do kind of create a character that kind of in their own way, it is nice to kind of lean into both like those, again, you're going to use the buzzword vices and virtues, to be like, you know, my character is particularly envious of, you know, others kind of success, and to have those encounters as it's a role play opportunity, and two, everyone likes a character arc, you know, like that moment where they're just like, I'm not envious anymore, I don't know, whatever the opposite of envious.
It really did help me think a lot more about, even just in my home game, like with this encounter, what is it I want my characters to be feeling, and what am I testing them on? Like, so kind of the obvious example for D&D would be like, well, you have your paladin and you want to make sure they're like virtuous in some way. So how can you actually test that? Or how can you test if your warlock is really like on the same wavelength as the patron?
Yeah. And I think as well, because like I think D&D does have like a series of kind of, again, you look at like the kind of alignment system is kind of like a really nice comparison. Is like, where do they fall on like, you know, the lawful to kind of like chaotic side of things, where, you know, or the kind of good to evil spectrum of like giving those options where, again, that's what I kind of, I've got with you on it. Is like the kind of best sort of encounters not only have, again, multiple kind of outcomes, but have them kind of based on the player's kind of level of agency. The ability for like a player to be like, this is an encounter about, I don't know, like a criminal being caught in the act, and it's a case of like, by the lawful character should be like, good, let's go ahead, proceed, you know, they've broken the law, or vice versa. They could be like, even though they're a lawful character, they see, you know, an error in the encounter that makes them kind of second guess, like, well, it doesn't quite, and that way everyone kind of walks away, you know, with a little bit of like character growth, which is good, because I must say, like, a lot of the stuff that I've kind of been doing is I've done items and encounters for Waterdeep as well as Baldur's Gate, and it's a little bit more not more challenging, but because each encounter is kind of designed around like a magic item in particular, and it's normally just like a book to like, hey, you want to give your players more magic items, here's some ways that, you know, you can insert, but yeah, maybe I think I'm with you now that I can step it up a bit more and make things a little bit more like, oh, what's going on, you gotta make some choices. With, if you, I don't want to be like, do you remember stuff like, but I mean, like with some of your desert like work and stuff out, was there one or any kind of aspect that kind of stood out as like,
Jeez, this is like about a year ago.
Okay, no, that's it's, I must admit that, it's always the nature of like, again, looking at like a catalog and stuff like that. I mean, I'm just as bad with like my bag of Starlight. I know it looked good, I can tell you that much, but it's just
I really, there's not a particular one that comes to mind, but I do just remember thinking like, this is a good way to really get to explore your characters a bit more than just what's on the sheet, you know.
So then I guess to kind of like, I guess, step back a little bit for more kind of the like individual projects kind of as a whole then, and more about it, again, we kind of mentioned before, is like, again, you've done items, you've kind of done, again, encounters kind of in their own way, you're working on like some alien kind of like player options. Is it like you're quite happy kind of working kind of with all these kind of design spaces, or do you kind of, I don't know, naturally gravitate towards any particular area?
I think part of it is kind of looking to find my niche, see where I'm most comfortable. I guess the other part of it is I am a bit of a magpie of a person, and I'm always just looking for that next new thing to try. I don't know. I do love writing monsters. for 5e, but going forward, I'd like to do a bit more that's not D&D, but for D&D, I do love writing monsters.
No, I think I've again always kind of said that you do benefit a lot in just you kind of like, I was about to say RPG writing repertoire, and I was like, wow, that's very so that's fancy, nice. So pompous. But you honestly like it kind of, the more kind of well versed you are in RPGs as a whole, it kind of has that kind of like knock-on effect of like you can bring things across different games and kind of understand what games kind of can handle certain topics a little bit better. I did want to I guess touch on a little bit, because you did say you do like designing monsters.
I do, yeah.
Is there any any particular like monster design that you go for? Are you do you quite like working in like the lower CR ranges where it's just like little things, or are you thinking like CR 2025 of like game ending?
I think the sweet point is around 10 for me, because that's when you start being able to do some really mean things, but you're not getting into the kind of like really wild, anything can happen, the players are gods sort of territory. So around 10 is fun.
So what's some of the mean things that you're talking about then?
I don't know. I mean, I think for me, when I'm making a monster, it's got to have like one really cool thing. Otherwise, what's the point? And so I guess if one of my favorite monsters I wrote was in the Incredible Creatures book, and it's called the Sizel, and it is obsessed with making masks, and there's a chance when you encounter it that one of its masks looks like the player, and if it does, then the player can't do anything but to try and get its own mask. But there's like saves involved and things, but just kind of having, for example, if that monster just completely take one of the players out of the I
think I'm 100% with you, is because it's what I think, like sometimes when you're kind of designing a creature, there is always that kind of hesitancy, like, oh, this is gonna, this potentially feels bad or kind of unfair, or what. And there are, again, I don't want to say that there's no limits on it and stuff like that, but in the context of like, this is a singular encounter that the players are going to kind of experience and stuff like that. And as the DM, there are probably countless times where you're like, oh, this is a really cool creature, they're going to do this one thing, and then one player comes along and goes, I'm going to polymorph it, or I'm going to banishment, and then that's kind of like, okay, well, I guess I don't have fun today as a GM. But what I particularly like about like the design you're kind of chatting about is the fact that like, even though the mask does kind of remove one player's kind of abilities and stuff like that, it completely changes the kind of nature of the fight. The fact that not only does that one player kind of now prioritize kind of getting their mask back, the other players kind of, ideally, again, if they're nice, should strategize around, let's get this player that their mask back so they can kind of get back in.
That's something I really like to think about when I'm making monsters. Like when this is in play, what is going to make this encounter memorable? What are the players going to do that they can't normally, or how does it change how they're going to act? That's the key to a fun monster, I think.
There is obviously, I think I'm trying to think of like some of the things that I've kind of done in the past, and the kind of far end of the spectrum of like everyone's stunned is a little bit mean. I always I think I liked one the other day where it was the idea of a kind of like a strong man, like the old-fashioned kind of I forget the name of what the clothing they wear, but it's basically striped.
Like leotard.
The leotard, there you go. And they had like a very mean punch, but they had the option to essentially kind of like wind up their punch. And so the longer players went without kind of getting punched or getting hit, the stronger it got. So it was kind of that balance of that kind of incentivizing of like, we need to someone needs to get punched soon, or otherwise they're going to be knocked out, or
That's really fun.
But
I like that a lot.
awesome. And I think so. I think as well. So was it Incredible Creatures is Alan Tucker?
Yeah, Alan Tucker's.
Yeah. And I think that they had quite an interesting approach in terms of because basically I think with each basically you have like pieces of art, and each piece of art has, I think, was it multiple like stat blocks?
Yeah, it was one for each tier. So yeah, four stat blocks per art, and it was just the most fun to work on.
It's got to be an interesting challenge though, looking at like a creature that looks particularly scary, and just thinking, how do I make this like a CR1?
Yeah. There was definitely a couple where they're like this big sort of demon-y things, and you're like, okay, but I mean, do I just make it tiny, or what else can I do to make it maybe a little bit less scary? But yeah, that was so much fun. I think especially because one of the things I really love about working with other writers is seeing how they kind of approach the same brief.
Yeah.
And this was like the most extreme version of that, because we're all working on like the same monsters pretty much.
Yeah, I must admit that it's kind of like such a fascinating thing. It's like you could almost do like just looking across the book of like, wow, this is like the same prompt, and how kind of different people. I'm curious though, like in your experience, was there any moments where like my mind goes straight to like, okay, I'm going to use a beluga whale as an example. But say you have a piece of art where it looks like a fish with like an antenna on the front of the head. I feel like regardless of kind of what kind of like CR rating they're kind of at, I feel like, I don't know why, it's just the art would inspire the similar sorts of abilities. Did you still kind of find that there was, again, despite the same artistic prompt, there was like a good amount of diversity?
I think there definitely was, like, even I mean, one of the ones I wrote for, it looked like kind of a rhinoceros on fire.
Nice.
And so you kind of think, well, it's going to be some kind of fiery thing, like there's no getting away from it dealing fire damage or being like an elemental or something like that. But even within that, I was surprised to see like how different people's approaches could be.
No, I guess as well, you also kind of like I almost like the idea of like seeing the same creature multiple times, and just kind of like through the nature of just like, again, not every rhinoceros or phinoceros, is that a pun? I'm just going to call them phinoceroses. Despite being the same creature, then they might not all fundamentally act the same. Mm-hmm. And the idea that some of them may have, like, I don't know, like some might prioritize spitting fire, some others might just try. And I think that's kind of cool, because anything that kind of like there is always that moment where obviously players come to the table, you kind of like, you describe a monster, and players are like, yes, a beholder. I know where we're going on this one, and to almost be like, no, you don't know this beholder. This is different. This is new.
Yeah.
It's always nice. Again, it's nice because it keeps players on their toes and kind of again stops that kind of. Not that metagaming bad, but unless like the characters are like, oh yeah, no, we've fought and killed thousands of beholders. We know what we're doing now. Nice. And then, well, I guess kind of more generally, is there any kind of projects of yours that we kind of haven't spoken about that you kind of would like to kind of like, yeah, I liked what I did there?
Let's see. I've forgotten which ones we've spoken about.
I must admit, we haven't actually spoken about dragons, delvins, and.
True. Yeah. No, that was a lot of fun. The pitch for that one was to sort of pick a particular dragon scale color, and then make a cool place for that dragon to live.
So, and if I remember, you said you did a carnival.
Yeah, so I picked a copper dragon, and so they're kind of like a little more sort of whimsical of the metallic dragons. So he runs a fun fair, and I got to write a lot of like mini games for it, which was a lot of fun. And because I felt like it's less likely to be sort of a combat encounter, I did like a nice skill challenge at the end for like, if you want something from the dragon, like you're gonna have to beat him at his own game.
Yeah.
So.
I like it. It's almost like a condensed version of the Witchlight. It's good.
Yeah. I was writing that like a little while. I knew Witchlight was coming out, but it was before the book was released. So I guess you could tie it in if you wanted to. If I like... just plug my own book for a little bit.
What was like? So you mentioned you were making all sort of like mini games. Where do you kind of like? Did you literally again the old kind of like carnival games of like the ring toss, the kind of like?
I did like I did a little sort of Wikipedia rabbit hole of what are like games at fairs around the world and just see what sort of ones pop up the most. And so I've got things like tug of war, which seems to happen everywhere, and I think I did like some sort of classic English fair ones like the Coconut Shy, and then I picked a few others like I can't remember where, but there's a place where you have to climb a greased pole.
Really?
And the first one to the top wins, and I was like, that is too much fun, so I included that one. And
no, wait. So is it the Coconut Shy? Is that like I've always just assumed that's kind of like a worldwide thing. Is that like is that actually the UK thing?
I don't know. Maybe I'm assuming it's a UK thing.
It sounds like a lot like British of like we're just we coconuts not native to the UK in any way, shape, or form. We just put them on a little cup and you throw things at them. The ones that I always don't like at the fair it's the ones where there's like a tilted bucket. And you have to throw something in the bucket, and it's like at such an angle that like it always bounces out, and it's like a case of like
I did consider having like some dodgy carnival games, but I feel like the Copper Dragon's a good guy. These aren't going to be rigged games.
They're not. They're there to actually have the fun with prizes and everything. Yeah, no, fair. No, that's gotta. Yeah, no, I like that. The idea of like again, it is that case of almost subverting expectations of the idea that when the players encounter this copper dragon, they're like, okay, well, we'll follow this copper dragon back to their lair. We'll look at their their pile of gold, and or the dingy, damp caves that they live in. Now this copper dragon's living at large.
It's having a whirl of a time.
Awesome. Well, okay. Well, then I guess more generally, then we've gone over like a whole host of really, really awesome kind of like ideas and the kind of the inspiration where you've kind of pulled from them. But I guess more generally, where do your kind of like ideas start from?
I mean, I think because I've mostly really just been pitching to other people. A lot of it really comes from like if I see an open call, just being like, does this have like an immediate spark with me?
Mm-hmm.
And then my go-to thing is kind of basic, but I just like mind mapping things and just kind of doing word association on them. And so like if someone's pitching like, for example, the dragons, then I'm like, well, okay, so which dragon do I like, and what are the attributes you would associate with this dragon? I'm like, okay, so the copper dragon it's kind of the silly dragon of the bunch, and it likes having a good time. It's gonna have a fun fair. Like I guess it's maybe a little basic, but I like getting things down on paper and mapping things out, and then when I can see it all together, I'm like, okay, that could be a fun idea.
So I guess as you kind of like branching out, so obviously you kind of look at like again to take all the kind of traits of like copper dragons being like I think was it they hoard like bards. Or like that like which again, someone needs to. They can't be out and about. How often, like, so before you kind of came to the idea of like a fun fair or like like kind of, what were there many other options that you kind of explored, or again, is it through as you kind of go down that path, it naturally kind of narrows you towards what you're kind of most interested in?
For the copper dragon, I think I was pretty much like, oh no, I want to write a fun fair. That's going to be cool.
Yeah.
But I did sort of think like, what other dragons could I do? What would really be interesting to me? I think I had for a little while, I was thinking of like a gold dragon who had maybe become like a bit too authoritarian, and what could I do with that?
Mm-hmm.
but then that was less interesting for me. So I was like,
when you have the idea of like a fun fair and stuff like that, the idea of an author, it's all at the other end of the spectrum, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I think for that one, I got as far as like he could have like some automatons, and he was very lawful and but bad, and that was kind of fun. But yeah,
I must remember the idea that kind of like sparked in my mind is the idea of like you have almost like a fun fair for both, and you have like the copper fun fair where everything's kind of whimsy, everything's fun, and then you have the idea of like the most unfun fun fair,
the most regimented,
like the idea of like you get one go, you must keep your hand at 45 degrees, and everyone's like, this is there's coconuts everywhere.
That could be a fun contrast.
It could be. But no, I definitely, I can definitely see. But no, I definitely kind of see like that kind of approach, and I think that's what's kind of quite fun about when it comes to like answering like open calls or getting involved in kind of collaborations, is because you immediately start with a kind of, well, like I guess like a restriction of like, okay, it needs to sit within this space. And then you can still be just as creative, but it gives you that kind of starting point of like that central circle to kind of branch out from. Interesting. And I always kind of like to ask this question as well. So across like multiple of the pitches you've done and kind of the end product, have a lot of your ideas kind of stayed quite true, or again, have they kind of changed and adapted as they've been developed?
I mean, that's I think for most of them, they largely stay on track from where I started, just because I am terrible with scope. So if I let myself go too much, then it becomes something else completely. I think probably there's one I'm writing on at the moment, which I forgot to ask if I can mention, so I don't know if I should. I started with an idea of things being like kind of this gothic romance, and I've kind of ended up in a kind of vaporwave holiday resort.
Okay, that's two very
but there was like a thread of connection there. It was a bit of a strange one. But for the most part, once I find something that resonates with me, then I can pretty much stick with it.
That's fair. And again, I don't think it's good. Like if you've pitched something to be writing something very different, like
for sure, yeah.
But I mean, again, it's just through the nature of writing it, and then as you kind of get feedback and stuff like that, again, it's. But it's fascinating. Just because again, it's always interesting, kind of, especially when you kind of look back and you have your notes on like a page and be like, wow, that is where I started, and look where we are now. So across, as you're kind of digging in then and kind of starting the writing, you've kind of, you've worked your way through your mind map, you've committed to like an idea. What is your like favorite and least favorite part of the process?
I mean, the favorite bit has got to be the beginning and the end, like that sort of first flush of this is going to be great, and then like at the end you're like, I did a thing. So those but like, I guess that's kind of obvious, but those are like the middle bit where you're actually working on it. Like, it's fun, but it also has the realities of working on it. So
yeah, unfortunately, wasn't the like all sections of a project aren't like equal. In it's the idea of like I don't know. Take the carnival example of like I'm getting to write like the climb the greasy pole. That's so. And then next you have like, oh great, now I have to do coconut shy. Which again, compared to like climbing the greasy, it doesn't sound as fun.
Yeah, I mean, those are very good examples actually, because the greasy pole mechanics came to me pretty quickly, and then with the coconut show I was like, well, how can I make throwing something more interesting than just an attack roll? So I
think again, if there are any takeaways to our little chat here, it's that the coconut show sucks.
Yeah, definitely.
But I guess to dig a little bit deeper then, is there any particular part of like the middle then that you just like don't particularly enjoy, or is it literally just like, again, that that finishing?
I think I mean, it's not that I don't enjoy it. I wouldn't do it if I didn't. But I if I'm having trouble getting something done on paper, then it does get a bit frustrating. Although admittedly, I think the actual worst part is like the push to try and get other people to want to see it afterwards. Yeah, that's definitely the worst part.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Advertising is it doesn't it's that weird thing of like there's a whole bunch of like different advice that people have kind of passed out on this podcast. Like the idea of like a good way to like sell a product is to release a new product, or and I always kind of circle back to the idea that realistically, advertising is never done. Like even with your first thing you've ever released and stuff like that, you realistically you should still be advertising it, even if it's like 2-3 years up, or like however long it is. And that's hard. Like I don't know. Maybe I think it's my attention. Like I think it's that differentiation between my attention span as a creator is like on the new and shiny, what I'm doing immediately, what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
Whereas to the rest of kind of like I don't want to call them like customers, but like the community. They just want cool stuff, sometimes the what does it take, like the like Icewind Dale stuff that I'm that you've done, and some of the stuff that I'm kind of working on, stuff like that. If someone's running Icewind Dale, it doesn't really matter if they're 2 or 3 years behind the punch. They just want cool stuff about Icewind Dale, and maybe they need some beluga whales. Okay, what did you call your like beluga whales?
I called them Lucons.
Oh, Lucon. That makes them sound almost adorable.
They're quite formidable, I think.
I like that's a really like a very polite way of saying they're not adorable in any way. They're really not. No. Yeah. Also, again, I'm gonna use a second Google because I do want to get beluga whale. I just want to see one with my eyes. Yeah, they do. They've got like a literally a forehead like a 90-degree angle.
Yeah, I mean there's something kind of smiley about them, which is a bit cute, but I don't think I'd want to be in the water.
No, especially not in like for like freezing cold frigid temperatures. Okay, sorry. Again, I think at least like a good like 2-3% of this podcast has been spent saying beluga whale.
It's a nice word.
Yeah, dude, I do like it. But no, so then I guess I always like to kind of ask this question to like look across everything you've kind of done and kind of point to like any particular like highlights. So do you think there's like one like a design choice you made, like again it may be the beluga whale, but something that you've done that you're particularly quite proud of?
Jeez. I mean, if I can say like a whole thing, I was really proud of the Magic Shop catalog as a whole product. Not just for my own bit, but there was like such a wealth of stuff in that book that I think it's a shame that it was kind of buried, I think. But yeah.
Because that was released on Drive-Thru as well, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Which I think again it's unfortunately a much kind of like a fiercer marketplace, or I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just that I think the DMsGuild has the benefit and in some way a drawback of just being so hyper focused on D&D. But what were some of the magic shops that you kind of came up with?
Yeah, so the fun thing about the magic shops was they were actually completely game agnostic. So they're just cool things that literally any fantasy world can use. And for that particular one, I had a shop that you had to enter via a frog's mouth to reach.
That's adorable.
And it was just a really fun, like, you got to design the shopkeepers and a couple of like magical items and like what is the special thing that they can offer you that other magical shopkeepers can't. So I mean, obviously mine was a teleporting frog. Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and there's a lot of character across all of the shops in that book.
And there is definitely something to kind of be said about like writing that kind of like setting agnostic content, because the idea, particularly when it comes to like magic items and stuff like that, you have kind of like absolute kind of freedom where you can see like you can say a more like general thing of like what the item does, and not have to necessarily worry about the one-to-one like rules translations.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Like it's sometimes easier to like it's a ring that teleports you. Like sometimes that's all you kind of need to say. But like again, if you're doing with like D&D 5e, you're like there's a very particular way to say this ring allows you to cast the teleport spell, or
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
it's yeah.
So it did sort of take those like blinders off. I get blinkers. What are those?
Yeah, no, yeah, blinders, blinkers.
Yeah, and let you like think a little bit more about just fantasy in general, really. So that was really fun.
It's funny though, because so talking about like the giant frog mouth. You know, there was the Dungeon Master Challenge.
Yeah.
And the first entrant was like asking people to like submit like a trap. My trap involved the giant frog mouth.
Really?
Yeah. No, I imagine your shop again is probably the much more pleasant side of things. Mine was again a frog mouth that's going to eat you. I don't think a shop does business well if one of the first things that happens as you step into their shop is you get digested.
No, it's very clean and dry on the inside.
No, that's again. I must say, yeah. No, I never really thought about it, but that's something I do look for in a shop is dryness. That's like a bare minimum. I've never really been into too many. But how, like for the Magic Shop project, was it just you had? Again, I don't want to keep calling it the Frog Shop.
No, it was called Lynn's Portal of Amphibian Delights.
Oh. So how many kind of shops did you put together for that?
For me, I just did the one. I think some of the other writers did a couple, but it was like a really deep dive in like how do you find the shop, what does the shop look like, how are the shopkeepers, what are their names, how do they act.
So like literally a complete deep dive to literally make it drag and drop to kind of almost within.
So a lot of fun and super useful as well, I think.
Nice. What were some of the so when coming up with like the kind of proprietor, like the owner of the shop and everything, what were some of the characteristics you gave them?
So I made Lynn is the shop owner, and Lynn is the frog whose mouth you have to enter. And then I had basically the shop is run by all of Lynn's tadpole children.
Aww.
So that was really fun, and I actually I wanted to give this idea of it being super hectic and there being loads of tadpoles running around. So I had like a roll table for creating your own tadpole. So that was something I was quite pleased with how that came out.
Nice. No, I imagine, are these like normal like are these like tadpoles with legs?
Yeah, like bipedal tadpoles.
Okay, yeah, I just imagine like I don't know the idea of like the shot, they're just on the floor, riding away. Which I guess it would be a vibe, but it's it's
different kind of vibe.
So, moving away from tadpoles and frogs in kind of general, across again with the kind of the work on the Magic Shop catalog being kind of like a particular kind of highlight. I guess on like the other end of the spectrum, has there been like a lesson that you've learned, over the course of creating many things that you'd maybe wish you'd learned sooner?
I think really the thing I've learned is it's not really like a general design thing. It's more of a personal Kirsty stop thinking this way sort of thing. And just my takeaway is just talk to people because they're usually friendly and nice and willing to help. And I can be a bit silly about keeping things struggles to myself and just powering through things. And
again, I don't want to make it all, but it is very much like a British sensibility thing.
Probably.
Yeah, I don't want to blame everything on but no, 100%. And I think it's always kind of like the moment you kind of have those kind of like open discussions where you're just like, hey, I'm not quite sure how to do, my beluga whale. And then having those kind of open discussions like, well, you could do this, and again, I think there's an ultimate power in, I think, what's it called, they call it like the rubber duck effect, where sometimes just like explaining your problems to like a rubber duck helps you kind of solve them. It's twice as fast if the rubber duck can talk back.
Yeah, for sure.
Not to reduce any collaborators to just being a duck that I talk at. It's just the that kind of nature of just a problem shared is like a problem halved.
For sure. I'm
kind of with you. And that actually that segues into my next question nicely, which is then kind of like of the people you've kind of reached out and kind of got help from and kind of got engaged with.
Mm-hmm.
Who are like some of the people within the tabletop RPG community that like, well, I normally say most inspire you, but I'm gonna do some question tweaking. We're living free. I guess have you found like most helpful?
Gosh, that is a question. I mean, really, this is just going to sound like so like Miss World, but everyone has been so helpful and really great. I do want to I guess give a little shout out to Alan Tucker, because he's been like a real cheerleader for me, and that's been really nice. But I haven't worked with a bad person so far. And with some of the like, there's been some like really big groups, so that's quite an achievement, I think.
No, I like that. I get it. I think I've said before that sometimes that question, like, I don't think it's like a cruel question, but because of how like it's only cruel because of how lovely the tabletop RPG industry can be at times, that it's like everyone's nice. I don't be pick on like one person. Everyone.
I really don't want to like leave anyone out, but I haven't had, especially like project management isn't my sort of forte as well, but everyone who I've worked with who's led projects have just been so on top of everything and communicative and helpful and great. So
it's basically all you can kind of hope for is kind of like the clear goals, clear kind of like deadlines, and everyone kind of like working together to kind of move towards those. And I'm kind of with you. But then so then I'll go back to my previous question then, about like sources of inspiration then. What about them?
Oh geez. I don't know.
I mean, again, I'll give you I guess the easy answer would be like all the people I've worked with. They've been so nice.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. I mean, anyone I've pitched to, really, because there was something in the core that made me think, oh, that I could do something fun with that.
Yeah.
So if I've pitched to you, you're great.
No, and like that, I guess in correct like a literal way, it's like their project and stuff has kind of given you the opportunity to be like, I've got an idea. I'm suddenly now I'm being creative. I've got the like I want to get down, and it wouldn't exist without those kind of like project kind of pitches. So well, Kirsty, looking at the time, we've done it. And
we've done it.
We've done it. We've survived. This is where I feed in like an audience clapping and but as kind of always, I don't want to leave without kind of hearing about some of the cool stuff that you kind of have coming on the, I guess, more immediate horizon.
I forgot to ask anyone I'm working with if they're okay for me to mention things.
I was going to say, I think at the very least, I know that I think you might be allowed to talk about whatever you're working on with Alan.
Yeah, I do want to talk about that one.
Just because I think like the reason why we're kind of chatting today is like Alan was like, hey, I want to chat about this, and I'm like, well, me and you have chatted before.
Yeah, so Alan brought me on for his upcoming Kickstarter for Eye of Everywhere, which is a sort of spacey science fantasy setting for 5e, and I have had so much fun working on it. I'm really more of a sci-fi girl at heart than a fantasy girl, so this has been awesome, and I think it's going to be really cool. And if the Kickstarter does well, then I get to write more things for it. So please go back to Kickstarter when it launches December time, I think.
Nice.
Yeah.
No, and like I said, if at the point of like when this chat goes out, there is a follow link of like just before things go live, you can check out the thing. There'll be a link to that description for people to check out. It's nice. Like again, sometimes there's not enough support for like the space as a whole, and
Yeah.
like again, sometimes it's like, oh yeah, I can just write space stuff. Nothing's gonna stop me. But my second question is kind of like, well, now we know some of the cool stuff that's on the horizon. Where can people stay up to date and kind of hear the words directly from the bird's mouth? Is that I feel bad. I don't want to imply. I don't want to like. I'm not trying to call you a bird. It's just
sure. I guess the best place is my card. I don't know if you meant to like really hold on to the R when you say that, card.
I think so. Was it? Yeah, like the it's got 2 R's in it, so like you have to pronounce one of them at least.
So that's battlefluff.card.co is probably the best place. I try and keep that up to date.
Nice. Yeah, and there'll be a link to the description for that as well.
Lovely, thank you.
Well, Kirsty, thank you so much. This has been delightful.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Nice. Well, yeah. I guess. I've been Matthew Whitby. You can find me at Whitby Writes. I have things I'm working on. I don't think they'll be out yet, so I'm not going to talk about them. And that's me. I'm done. But I will ask my favorite question and my final question, which is, Kirsty, how do you end a podcast?
Well, I mean, you nuke it from orbit, right? It's the only way to be sure.
Yeah. Well, I guess in 2 seconds there's just be an explosion then, isn't there?